more progress now, yes, dear, we're making more progress now. Still have a long way to go. They promised to bring us more revenue and quality. Promised to bring us more revenue and quality. Promised to bring us more revenue and quality. Instead is now on its way. Yes, dear, we're making more progress now. Yes, dear, we're making more progress now. Yes, dear, we're making more progress now. Selectmen will help us all out. They promise to bring us more revenue and quality. Promise to bring us more revenue and quality. Promise to bring us more revenue and quality. Winchester's now on its way. That isn't very good, isn't it?
Hello everybody, this is Brian O'Haron. I'm back again. This is the Christmas vacation. The show is composed in two different houses, two libraries, and one hotel. So if it's got a little bit of misspellings in here, that's the beauty of computers. You can work from almost anywhere, knock out these slides and get on and get going. We're going to have an interesting show, a lot of meat packed in today. The first thing we have is the agenda. It's going to kind of a short agenda, only 5 items on it. One is comments, which I'll make, very short this week. Then I'm going to talk a lot about Mr. Route 8, one of my original mentors, Tony Miscikoski of Torrington, Connecticut, 22-year state representative and real results orientated. I worked for him when I was in high school in his Tony's restaurant up on high on Main Street and off of Midgeon Avenue, actually, in Torrington, Connecticut. I worked there night shifts when I was going through high school and slept during school and during the day. But I learned more from him, I think, than I ever could from school. So today I'm going to pay tribute to him. I have many mentors, as you're beginning to find out, since I was a kid, starting with my parents and grandfather and uncles and aunts and all, and moving up the scale through teachers, and then finally entrepreneurs. When I got to be 11, I started working for entrepreneurs, and some of them will be shown on here. Then I'm going to talk a bit today about the Enterprise Corridor and where we stand on that progress, because we need that for the quantum leap. We need those developments up there, practical, plus all the other development we're going to do on the Enterprise Corridor as a result of running the sewer and water pipes down almost to the Torrington town line. And then we'll talk a bit about the financials of the development, where we stand now, because Winchester Estates has come back in for the process after being denied by planning and zoning some months ago with a new configuration. I'm going to compare those two configurations for you today to show you a bit about the economics of them at a very high, rough level, nowhere near official numbers, just a rough idea. And then I'm going to talk, I have some financial report if I can get that far. The first thing I'd like to say in the comments today is that I want to continue a bit with how businessmen think. I probably should have gone over this last week, but for one reason or another, I didn't put it in. But I think it's probably the most critical thing that businessmen have to learn to do, and these businessmen have learned to do over the years. That's why they're successful. Businessmen are used to trusting people. You have to trust people in business. Business is built on trust. You have to trust everybody. But not only do you have to trust, but you have to verify and learn who to trust and who you can trust and who you can't trust over the long term. So you start out by trusting, and then you verify everything for a while. And then when you get to the point where you don't think you have to verify anymore, then you have a real bond between two people that probably last a lifetime. If not, if you can't trust somebody and they prove that they cannot be trusted, it's proven that they cannot be trusted, they are cautious about trusting them again. Very difficult to trust people when they continually show they can't be trusted, especially with important confidences. So when a confidence is given between any of these political parties or any selectmen to the other selectmen that's supposed to be held in confidence information that might come out of some kind of a meeting or something, or a plan, when a confidence is given, the recipient betrays that confidence to the press, especially the press, or anyone else, it is considered a major offense. Now, I particularly still have this problem with people, selectmen, talking to the press and using the press as a battering ram against other political parties or other select people. And I think that more and more we have to say, no comment to the press, let them get their information from the public meetings. And if there are any comments, they should all be positive, and that we're all working together as a team, and they shouldn't be pitting one person against the other. A major offense is difficult to overcome. Once there's a major offense, distrust, then it's difficult to overcome, and especially if this betrayal leads to embarrassment for someone and or their family. It's not good, and we try to keep people's families and things like that out of the press as much as we can. It always hurts me to see some state senator or some U.S. senator standing up with his innocent family trying to explain away some of his transgressions. And we shouldn't be doing that in our town either. So having said that, I'm just going to talk a little bit now about a mouse pad I had up at the hotel in Maine. I went to see my daughter and my grandchildren for a few days this Christmas. And it was called IOU, and it was about leadership, ownership, and urgency. And it all falls into what I call the hospitality part of what we're trying to do in this town. So the leadership part is lead by example, lead by commitment, walk the walk. When I talk about it, we usually say walk the talk. If you say something, try to do it yourself. I have seen examples on TV where selectmen say things, but yet in their private life they do just the opposite. So you got to walk the talk, and people will notice if you don't. Listen actively and hear. That's a big thing. Most people listen. If you want to be successful, you have to listen to expertise that others have that perhaps you don't. Down here, I have to listen to the people that are running this program and doing all the technical work, and they do an excellent job, but I would be foolish to think I knew more than they do about doing their job. They probably know more than I do about sitting in this chair, but that's a different story. The next is ownership. You got to say, hey, it's up to me. We can't be blaming other people. We can't be blaming the past. These are my guests. These people are my guests. Remember, this comes from a hotel, and they're trying to teach people how to deal with their guests. I'm responsible no matter what the issue. Don't blame it on the guest. I choose my attitude. Have a good attitude with the guests. I care for it like it was my own. And think out of the box. I usually say lateral thinking because I'm very good friends with Edward de Bono, the world's leading author in the area of lateral thinking. We'll talk about that if we ever get time. But thinking out of the box is kind of what they say in America, probably because Edward's got the copyright on the use of lateral thinking. Anyway, urgency, do it now. Take immediate initiative. Be proactive. Seek creativity. Seek creative solutions. Seek answers, not questions and not challenges. One of these days I'm going to talk to you about peeling the layers of the onion. I keep forgetting to bring the onion in, but when we talk to people, we usually have to peel the layers of an onion to get at the truth. Sometimes there's many layers before you can finally get down to the facts because many excuses are given along the way. So that's what I wanted to put here. I didn't put it up as a slide because it's kind of small written. Now I want to get to my guest for today. That's Mr. Tony Miscikoski. You should see his picture here on the screen, and I would like to leave it up there because Tony Miscikoski was one of my first mentors when I was a kid, when I worked in his restaurant. Now, he was also at the same time a state senator, and state representative. I think he served at the same time as John Grappo from our area up here. Tony started his business in a chicken coop when he got back from the war. And also, when he got back from the war, he won a car in a lottery down in Torrington when cars were very scarce after the war, and they hadn't been making them for quite a while for the war effort. So he started this business in a chicken coop. I can remember as a young child buying a hot dog from him on Butler Street up near the Polish Church in Torrington, Connecticut. Then he moved up farther up the street, and that's where I worked in his small place, which grew over the years after I left. And wherever I went in the world, if I went to Frankfurt or I went to Hamburg or I went to Poland, I would send him a postcard from Frankfurt, Hamburg, and for Poland, of course, it's kielbasa. But and he had a secret sauce there, and he's now today 86 years old, lives in Torrington, Connecticut on Michigan Avenue, and he has the recipe for the secret sauce still in his safe. Now, I'd like to say that Tony was a taxpayer's candidate. He was very results-orientated. He was a Democrat, still is, who voted Republican. I don't think he's very popular in the Democratic Party for that. But he was an advocate in the Democratic Party for changing things and getting the rest of the Democrats to go along with his ideas, one of which was, and best idea was, he is called Mr. Route 8 around Connecticut, especially down in Hartford, because he was the guy who was most responsible for getting Route 8 run from Bridgeport up to Torrington. And he told me when I went to see him the other day that and I'm not sure about this, I'm going to call Mr. Grappo, I don't know him personally, but he says John Grappo was also instrumental in getting it run from Torrington to Winston. Now, without Route 8, guess what? We wouldn't have any development coming up here of the size and size and quality that it's going to be. Will be very difficult. We wouldn't even have probably what we have here now without Route 8. Some people might think that's good. Most people probably like the benefits of Route 8. So today I decided, because I'm going to be talking a lot about the development today, to put up Tony. He's responsible for a lot of things, for getting Route 8 run in. By the way, he was also father of the Connecticut Lottery. And it was House Bill 7238 and Public Act 71-865, he reminds me. He was a Polish-American who stayed back twice in the first grade because he couldn't speak English. I do have other friends who stood back in the first grade in those days, too, because they spoke French or some other language around the house before they went to school and couldn't master the language in time. So they had to take a couple years in the first grade. Anyway, he worked his way all the way up. He was 22 years as a state legislator and very, very well known. He's also a World War II combat veteran, 3rd Division, Company F, 7th Infantry, Southern France invasion, Rhineland, Africa, and Anzio. So he was a combat veteran, not serious stuff, and I thank him for that, World War II. He's a very successful entrepreneur. Besides his restaurant, he also owned quite a bit of real estate around Torrington. A successful businessman, results-oriented, and a good mentor for me. A very successful 65th Assembly District man for 22 years from the city of Torrington, Connecticut. Just a portion of his accomplishments. Did a lot to get the Yukon branch into Torrington, various health districts around the area, Willow Gardens, the first housing for elderly citizens in the state for Connecticut, elderly people. He voted against a state income tax always for 22 years. I think that finally did him in the end after 22 years. He saved the Torrington taxpayers millions of dollars by having the state take over all major highways going through Torrington, including snow removal and traffic lights, the maintenance of those. He garnered money, $150,000, which in those days was a lot of money, from the state of Connecticut for the Sullivan Senior Center in Torrington. His lottery has created over 15,000 new jobs made over 1,000 new millionaires to date, and earned a state profit of $6 billion and built Route 8. He also appropriated money to build new bridges and the widening of the Route 202 to Hartford. Many, many other things. Now, Tony also has a brother named Al Miscikoski, who also was one of my mentors in a different way. Al worked at the restaurant as well and was in the Navy during the war. Al was also called Al Maskey. Tony, by the way, is 86, and Al is 82. And Al ran in Polish a program in Torrington that my mother always listened to called Pololian Melodies. And he knew all the famous Polish musicians. They came through the restaurant to give him records to put on the jukebox, so hoping he would play them on his show, the Connecticut Twins and all those kind of people. So I met all those, and I got to spend a lot of time with them, and I got to love Polish music. And that's one of the reasons why I play the accordion. Actually, it's a squeeze box. Al played everything. He had a band, and he played in almost every Polish wedding there was in town. When I went to Poland, I was surprised because it was during the time of the Iron Curtain before Glasnost, and it was nowhere near as happy over there as it was in my hometown of Torrington in the Polish section up near Michigan Avenue and Pulaski Street. And, I couldn't get over that. They tell me now, though, that it's just as everything's come out from underground, and it's just as happy as it always was, and I've always had a good time. So I'd like to thank Al also for helping me along the way. And after Al on the Pololian Melodies every Sunday morning was another hour of Otta Randazzo. She played all the Italian music, and since I had a Sicilian Maltese background, we listened to that every Sunday as well. Okay, now I'm going to change, and we're going to change backgrounds here, and I want to talk a bit about the Enterprise Corridor, sewer and water. First, I guess I should say dziękuję to Tony and East Domu Spach, and I'll see you again. It was a very enlightening meeting I had with him a few days ago to garner all these facts. Very, very successful and encouraging entrepreneur and mentor. The Enterprise Corridor is the corridor down the old Route 8 between Winsted and Torrington. We've talked about it on a few of the last shows. Planning is very instrumental for getting water and sewer down there for this new development and all the development we want to do in the Enterprise Corridor, which we already have permission for, and where people can get tax breaks to set up businesses, etc. But Planning and Zoning has discussed the recommendation by the selectmen at their last meeting, and a letter was submitted by the developer to Planning and Zoning. They didn't get a chance to look at it last time because it came in kind of late, but I see he's got the camera pointed here. I better put up one of the slides for you. I lose a little track here when I get moving. Okay, I'll put this up. This might help you a little. All right. So the letter was submitted a little too late for them to look at the last meeting, so it will be looked at in a future meeting. Both these things will be considered at the P&Z meeting on Monday, January 28, 2008, in the Hicks Room of the Town Hall. That'll be a public hearing. So anybody who's interested in this development and wants to hear the facts from the real experts and not from the armchair experts or armchair quarterbacks, get down to the meeting and hear it for yourself. Listen for yourself, especially to the public hearing, because that's when the experts come in and they present this stuff, and then they ask a lot of questions. So it's good to be there, and let me tell you, few people go that are in favor of things. A lot of people go who aren't in favor of things. So it'd be nice to see some balance there and get people out that are also in favor of these developments and the benefits of the developments, which we'll talk a bit about tonight. A meeting was held with a representative of the Litchfield Hills Council of elected officials and a representative of the State Office of Policy Management, and the P&Z chairman and P&Z director and the mayor and a selectman were present at that meeting. Evidently, the criticality of the situation seems to be more or less agreed, and matters will continue to progress towards the in-the-ground date objective of somewhere around midsummer. Doesn't mean it'll be achieved, but that's what we were talking about on previous shows, and hopefully before next winter we can get these people digging into the ground and getting on with these, get our permits and get them going. So the most important issue for Highland Ridge Estates and Country Club, which they've already received the Inland Wetland and Planning and Zoning approval for, is still the obtaining of the Army Corps of Engineers and Department of the Environment, DOE permits. Planometrics, which is a company somewhere around here in Connecticut that helps people plan their long-term plans for conservation and development. They're like consultants. They will attend an informal meeting with the P&Z on January 14th, 2007 to discuss their possible participation in the future planning of updates to the POCD. I think it's kind of agreed now that in one form or another it will be evolved and there won't be a revolution there, but I'm not positive, so don't hang me if they end up with a revolution. The latest Winchester Estates application, which is the second development we keep talking about, the one that was denied in planning and zoning but approved in inland wetlands in the past. It was denied for reasons of density in the past, and we'll talk a bit about that later. The latest Winchester Estates application, which will most likely not need approval from the Army Corps of Engineers and DP, are being processed now. The P&Z public hearing is scheduled the P&Z public hearing is scheduled for January 28th, 2008 at 7 p.m. in the Hicks Room, weather permitting. You know how the weather is around here. They may not have it, but they'll postpone it if there's bad weather. Inland Wetlands will continue processing the application during their regular scheduled meetings on third Wednesday of each month, the weather permitting again. The next meeting is on January 16th, 2008 in the Hicks Room of the Town Hall, weather permitting. Now, as far as the new Winchester Estates, I did a little comparison here because I like to work with numbers. Remember, my Indian name is He Who Flies by Instruments, so I like to fly by instruments and their numbers usually. That's all right. I just hit the stand. You might want to check it and see if it's still okay. Anyway, the old one that was denied was 122 acres and 387 multi-unit family residences broken down in a certain way that I'll explain in a minute. The current one is still 122 acres, but it's 302 condos instead of, and they're also different configurations, but that's a smaller number, and that's mainly because of the density issues. And besides, although they reduced that number, they have included things like soccer fields and a swimming pool and a clubhouse and things like that. I'm not exactly sure on the details. I'll know more after I attend their meeting at the end of January. But basically, they got a pile of stuff there at the town hall that would take you a month or two to read, and I just didn't have the time to go through all that. But I will hear it when I go, condensed version, when I go to the public hearing, and you can do the same if you want to. So that's it. We went from 387 to 302. Now, the application that was denied had 120 age-restricted apartment-style condos. Age restriction is 55 and older. That basically means there probably won't be many children in that part of the development. So the first one had 120 age-restricted apartment-style condos. This was requested by the town of Winchester from the developer way back years ago. And then it had 123 age-restricted multi-family condos, 123. So altogether, that's 243 age-restricted buildings of one sort or another. And then they also had in their configuration 144 unrestricted condos. That means that they could have children in those condos. So the balance was heavy on, let's say, you know, 2/3 of it was age-restricted with no children. 1/3 had children allowed. And that is important when you start looking at the profit and loss of these developments to see how they balance in the town. Again, I think I mentioned it once before, we're not against children, we love children, but we must watch the balance to make sure that we don't flood the schools, and I don't think this will flood the schools, and that's what I want to go through today so that you get some idea, because there are a lot of rumors, a lot of people spread rumors about these things that perhaps aren't facts. Not saying all mine are the facts, but we will upgrade anything. This all comes from public information from the town, so it's as accurate as I can get it at this particular time. Some of the numbers I'm going to talk about later come from the developer, alone, and they're just estimates, pure estimates, and some of the school stuff is pure estimates as well. But now, what is the new one? The current one is 125 age restricted, 55 and older. So that's dropped from 243 down to 125. And the number of unrestricted with 2 to 3 bedrooms and children okay, that's raised up a little bit, and I'll show you that on the next slide. So here's basically what's happened here is we've gone from restricted from 243 down to 125 for the age restricted, and we've gone up by 33 in the unrestricted, which means children allowed, from 144 to 177. Now the difference here is we've subtracted 120 age-restricted apartment-style condos that we had in the original configuration that was too dense to be accepted, and we've added 3 age-restricted condos and 3 unrestricted multi-family condos. So we've actually added more unrestricted and taken away a lot of age-restricted. And then we've included perhaps more open space. I'm not quite sure on the details on this, but I will find out at the meeting when I go. And in the open space will be, first of all, there'll be open space. And I was just my daughter's renting in one of these developments up in Maine, and boy, they have a lot of open space, So in this open space area, that's called passive open space area, there's a clubhouse, swimming pool, athletic fields, natural trails. I'm not so sure how much of that is shared with the other development, Highland Ridge and Country Club, and I did send an email off to the developer to try to clarify that. Again, I'll know that on future programs, and we'll pin that down. But so we made a trade-off there of age-restricted apartments, a number of them, for the more open space than was in the first one, and these extra amenities here that the town kind of wanted to see in maybe not exactly the form submitted, but in one form or another for the children and the taxpayers in the town to enjoy. Then the next planning and zoning meeting, public hearing, which I urge you all to go to. It's in a small room, the Hicks room in Town Hall, probably holds 30, 40 people, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. Very uncomfortable chairs. But planning and zoning runs a pretty efficient meeting, and I've always been impressed by the way they run their meetings, and very well chaired, and I think you'll find it'll be very interesting for you to listen to this, and there'll be public there making comments, and you're welcome to make any comments yourself too and seek any answers. It all goes into the public record. It's all done on tape, so if you can't make the meeting, you can get a copy of the tapes. Cost $10 a tape. They're audio tapes, and you can listen to what happened there. There'll be a few hours of that, and there may be another meeting in the future months with another couple hours. And it'll go until everybody's happy that the chairman and the planning and zoning people have heard all the evidence. And then in the wetlands, their next meeting is January 16th, and a public hearing probably won't be required for that, but you're welcome to go and listen. You can't say anything at a non-public meeting, but you can listen. So now I want to show you the assumptions that I made. The assumptions are, for the future things I'm going to talk about here, the number of condos planned, all that information comes right from the information on the application submitted to the town. I just went down and got a copy of each application, about 4 or 5 pages, and I got that data from there for the last one and for this one. And so the numbers should be pretty accurate, give or take a little, 1 or 2 if they decide to change during the public hearings or during all this process of approval. When they put conditions on all these, they could put it, all kinds of conditions can go on there. Less this, more that, more open space, less open space, more age restricted, less, age restricted, more unrestricted, less unrestricted, there's all kinds of conditions that will be put on these things, agreed to by the town and the developer, hopefully. The per capita expense comes from a report that was submitted with the Highland Ridge stuff into the public hearing. You can get a copy of it from the town hall or from me if you want one. It's called the Harold Michalowski report, submitted for the record during the Highland Ridge Estates and Country Club public hearing in 2006, and it's on page 6. Most of the information I used, the numbers. The expense per pupil may not be quite up to date. It's also from the same Harold Michalowski report, which did a very interesting report, by the way. If you can get a copy of it, it's in my green papers down at the City Hall. You can also get it from Planning and Zoning or Inland Wetlands, probably. But it tells a lot about the town, how many children per house, how many cars per house, all that kind of stuff. So that's where I got this information from. I did send an email to both. I sent it to the superintendent of schools, and I sent it to an individual to pass on to Dr. Cressy, because I didn't have his email address up there in Maine. But I'm just trying to verify this 6720 is still fairly accurate. That's how much it costs us to send a child to school after the state grants. So before the state grants, it's much more than that. But after the state grants, it's somewhere in that area. And if I get better information than is in this report, I will change these numbers and go over them with you. But I wanted something so you can get a rough idea before the end of January, when the public hearing is, what we're looking at here. So now, those are all, there will be recurring. Most of the things I'm looking at are recurring tax income that are coming into the town. Recurring revenue for the town of Winchester for our company. Now, there's also one-time revenues coming in that are quite substantial. For each home connection fee, there's a sewer connection fee of about $1,000 per unit, and there's a water connection fee of $1,000 per unit. So if there's roughly 850 units, that's $850,000 times 2. You're up to 1.6 million, something like that. That goes into the water and sewer budget and is used for the benefit of the town one way or another. That information comes from the town of Winchester documentation at Public Works. If you go down there and ask the director of Public Works, he can tell you and verify those numbers. So, but they're once off. Those are like permit fees. And then there's other permit fees that I don't have on here, but that's like for building the houses. There's a fee, permit fee for each house, and that's all one-time revenue as well. The permit fees for the houses and apartments and condos, they go into in the regular town budget. So that helps us to get our $16 million average growth every year, and this will really help in that area. Okay, now, having given you those, I will now talk a bit about each of these developments. And the first thing I want to say is Highland Ridge. That's the one that's already approved, waiting for the Army Corps of Engineers and the DOE approval. The first thing I want to say there is that the recurring revenue, there'll be 456 age-restricted residences there. That means no children. I think they put in their plan about 20 children, so I use that number here in these figures. And their sales price, according to the developer now, was originally about $350,000, but over the years here that they've been applying, it's gone up to $400,000 they're expecting to sell each of these units for. And the revenue to the town will be about $182,400,000. And the assessed value, you take the revenue and you multiply by 0.70, 70%. The assessed value is $127,680,000, and the taxes to the town will be about $4,374,317, and these are estimates. This is just a ballpark number, the best we can do at this particular time. All kinds of things will change between now and then, and this is over about a 10-year, 8-year period. The developer might say a little less than that, but I'm trying to be kind of conservative here. Next is I used 8 in my spreadsheets that I did for the future objectives of the town. 8 years, 3% a year for 8 years. Once started, won't get started for 3 or 4 years. Okay, and then the recurring cost of the town be about $662. That comes from the Michalowski report times 456, and that's 301. Actually, I used. I think I made a mistake there. The recurring cost of the town will be probably double that, because you'll have 2 people in every place, so it should be 2 times 456. So I got a mistake there, which I'll correct. So that'll be about 600,000, and then it'll be 20 children, roughly. Theoretically, there'll be none, but they figure one way or another, if somebody has to take care of a grandchild or something for some period of time, that could be there. So they put in 20, and that'd be 6,720. That comes from the Miscikoski report as well, and that would be about $134,400 for educating those children. So the total recurring cost of the town will be $436,272 plus the 300 I didn't do right, so it'd be about 700,000 in that area of cost. Winchester Estates is the second one that's going through the process now. By the way, the one, as you can see, the first one's very profitable to the town. Hardly any children, a lot of money coming in, and it's really going to help us. And that's already, almost there, almost approved. So once it does get approved by, say, the middle of next summer, then we'll be off and running on the actual development part. A lot of people have all kinds of reasons, peel and layer the onion, why it won't be ever get done, because they won't sell the homes, there aren't enough people, there's not enough demand, on and on and on. But we're going to be positive here. We're going to try to work with this developer and get it done. And my view is, it can't hurt. All we can do is try to win. And if it never gets done, then we've done the best we can, and we'll have to try to do better with what's left. But I think it will get done over time. Now, Winchester Estates is recurring revenue of 302 condos. Revenue to the town of 125 times 248,000. That's for the ones that are age restricted. That's 31 million. And then 177 that are not age restricted. They're 42,303,000. So the total sales price is about 73,303,000. Again, these are just rough estimates to give you an idea of what area we're dealing with, what we're dealing with here. It's like my mother-in-law always told my wife she would marry a very handsome, good-looking, intelligent person, but she never could say that it would be Brian O'Haron. That came later in life. So we're going to have to just take a rough estimate here, and then later in life, we will find out the exact numbers as we move down over the next few years. But we're talking here about total sales price of $73,303,000, $73,303,000, assessed value of $51,312,100, and taxes to the town about $1,757,953. Now this is a smaller development, as you know, and it's based on average housing prices that are a little less than the first one. So I'll give you an example. The 125, they're going to range from 225,000 to 270,000. I used an average of 248 for these numbers. And then the 177 unrestricted, they're going to range from 219 to 259,000. And they're going to be 2 to 3 bedrooms. That's why they'll probably have, I've upped the number of children here, and you'll see in a few minutes on that. And there's an average there of 239,000 I use for these numbers. Now, the recurring cost of the town for Winchester Estates is a little different than the first one. You got, here I did the math right, so good thing I got the degree, I guess. But recurring cost of the town, 662 from the Harold Miscikoski report, times 958. Remember, some of these numbers still got to be verified by the town eventually, but in times gone by, since this Harold report was done a year and a half ago, plus the best information I have available right now at my fingertips, times 958 residents, because there will be no children in those buildings, so I just multiplied the number units by the 2, and then so that's 600. There'll be 2 people in each unit, and I might even have a mistake there when I look at it now. But anyway, it's about 634,196, and it might be even less than that. I use 177 times 4. And no, I did it right. 177 times 4 and 125 times 2 plus 125 times 2. That should be a plus sign there. Equals 958. That's how many residents will be in this total complex, age restricted and I used two kids for each unrestricted one, 4 kids for each unrestricted one, and two people for 125. That's husband and wife, or husband and significant other, or whatever. There. So that comes up to $2,788,880, and that's how much the cost of the town will be. And then we have to take into consideration pupils, and they call them pupils now. When I was a kid, couldn't call them pupil. You had to call them a student. Pupil was a bad word. It meant person who couldn't learn. Nowadays, the state uses pupil, so everybody uses it. But that's $6,720 cost per pupil times 177 times 2. Now, I used a very conservative number here, too. The developer might say it's not going to be anywhere near 2 kids for each of these 177 units, but I did it that way, and I come up with these numbers. That's to be conservative, like an accountant would be, or somebody looking over your shoulder at your numbers. So if we have 2 people per condo, the recurring cost will be $3,423,076. If we have 1.5 people, the recurring cost will be $2,418,356. If it's only 1 pupil per condo, the recurring cost will be $1,823,636. And if we have 0.9 pupils per condo, which some educators say is probably more likely in the future than the 2 per average. I think the Miscikoski report last time used the average in Winston is about 2.2 or 2.1 pupils per household, you know, on average. So some might have 8, some might have none, but on average it would be somewhere in the neighborhood of 2. I can't remember the exact number from there now, but it's in that neighborhood. And so if it's 0.9 pupils per condo, it'd be $1,070,496, a heck of a lot less than $3,423,076 with 2. That means they would have to bear that cost. Now, I do have people getting back to me, I hope, with more correct information on the exact cost of a student in this day and age. And we know the number of students is dropping in Winston. So now I want to show you the Highland Ridge and the states and Winchester Estates, and I just moved the thing again. Tell me if it's, is anybody watching this? I guess not, but if you switch over to this slide, make sure it's centered right, because I just moved the stand. Is it okay? All right, thank you. Okay, now what I did is I put the 2 together so you could see the big picture. I call it the big picture always. $6,134,060 in revenue, minus $1,237,940 for per capita cost. That's the $662 I told you about from the report. That gives you, before any schools, $4,896,120. And then if schools, 2 per family, 2 pupils per family, the profit to the town for both will be $2,517,240,000. And if you divide that by the 600, that equals a mil now. It's about 3%. 6, 12, 18, 24. That's 4 times 3. That's about 12% that you would have to pay in taxes extra in the future if this development weren't here. And if the profit, if it's less children, goes up. So I'm just going to not read each one this time, but it goes up if there's only 0.9 students in each family, or pupils in each family for the 177 condos, it'll be a profit to the town of $3,827,640,000. So that's the good news. Either way, this is good. If Winchester Estates gets approved, we can still probably do okay. Now, I want to say that, what about the children? You know, we hear that a lot about in this town. What about the children? Well, then the children, and this is a bit of a crooked slide here, but let me try to straighten it out a little. Sometimes they get curled up, especially on rainy days. We have many schools for them to choose from. Let's assume there are 300, 350, worst case, 2 per 177 condos. We have many schools to choose from here, and some of the people who've been around town a long time said, well, Brian, they won't all go to the same schools. Some will go to trade school in Torrington, some will go to the Regional 7, some will go to St. Anthony's, some will go off to other schools elsewhere, especially if we can ever get a voucher system put in town, which I think it would be a good idea. Other people don't, but So we have many schools to choose from. So they won't all go to the same schools. So, and they won't all go to the same grade. So they'll be spread out over the grades in these various school systems. The average number of pupils per family, I'm told by the educators, is going down. And instead of being 2.1 or 2 per family average, it'll be more like 0.9 or somewhere in that area. I'm not sure about that, and I'm still trying to seek information on that. Information comes slowly from bureaucracies, so, and we have to move fast. So I have to go with these estimates in the meantime so you can have an idea of where we're headed. And then there is talk that we can already absorb some number of students into the existing school system for a minimal cost because we have a lot of the structures there and the overhead there anyway. We might have to add a few teachers, or we might have to do this or that. But and there might be more examples. If anybody has any examples of why we will be able to absorb these students, let me know and I'll include them here on this list. Now, just for the fun of it and for a business thing, I'm going to now talk about the benefit of changing from 125 age-restricted in this Winchester Estates proposal application to the town. I just want to say, hey, what happens if we go, during the process, we say, gee, we the town would rather have less unrestricted condos, and we'd rather have more age-restricted condos, because that would help us in the town to balance the needs of the schools and the needs of the taxpayers. And I'm not saying we absolutely have to have this. I think we just made a case that we still make quite a bit of money, especially if we don't have an average of 2 children in each of the 177 condos. But let's just say we go ahead and we make a change here, and we try to balance this a little better, and it can be done. Just trying to find my own. Okay, here it is. You get $6,134,060 in revenue, $1,116,132 in the cost per capita. You get, this is after you make a change from 125 age restricted to 217 age restricted, leaving 85 unrestricted, as I say on the chart. Then you have a benefit before the school children of $5,017,928. Then you subtract, because let's assume there's still 2 in a home. When we get down to 85 unrestricted, that would be $1,142,400 to educate them, if there are 2. If there's only 0.9, it'd be a lot less. And then you got profit of town of $3,875,524, and then the difference is $1,358,284. So we've gained $1,358,284 by moving those from unrestricted to age restricted. And if there are less pupils, then you can see these numbers get even more attractive. Then we have a profit to the town of up to $4,503,848,000. So you see, we could have a lot of benefit there. So I think the town should take that into consideration. The developer may not want to do it, or it may not be practical for the development, it may not happen. But it is another alternative to the already existing good alternative that we have. Now, I want to switch now for the last few minutes I have from that to talk a bit again about the upwards pressure on the budget, because we're getting into budget season now for the next year's budget. It's already starting. Turn of the year, by March 15th, we'll have to have a budget for 208, 209. And the fund balance is there. I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But the upwards pressure on the budget hasn't changed since the last time I talked to you. It's about $1,074,245, 5.33%. These are just rough estimates that I picked out of various meetings that I watch on TV, or 5.33%. And don't forget the reevaluation effect. Remember, we talked about that in the earlier meetings. We already know that up on the lake, and it's still very unofficial, some people have gone up between 200 and 800, 900% for various reasons up there. So we've got a lot of concern about taxes in the more affluent areas, and I think even around town we got a lot of appreciation in our land in the last 5 years. So that's that. Now, the other thing I'd like to talk about now is the fund balance. There's a lot of talk about the fund balance because the fund balance is where is our saving account. You can read in the charter, and the fund balance is presently, and this is rough, I got these numbers a couple weeks ago from the finance director. It might even change a bit since then, but it's presently about $1,342,709, of which $1,047,055 is available for use if we should have a major disaster or a major catastrophe or a major need for this. In the charter it says this money is to be used for major, safe or major reasons, not be used flippantly. So only $1,047,000 of that 055 is available. So the rest is reserved for expenses we made towards the end of last year that still haven't materialized, and it's called a reserve in business. They call it something a little different here, but so that money, $1,047,555, is available for use if necessary. The remainder is reserved for encumbrances and the purchase orders that were issued before June 3rd and the related goods or service that have not yet been received. And that's something that has to happen. Now, the fund balance is about 3.63% of our operating revenue. I checked this with the finance director, so these are pretty accurate numbers, although not perfect, as they change from day to day and from this to that, and interest rates and all that kind of thing. But the fund balance is about 3.63% of operating revenue now, and our auditor recommends a range of about 5 to 15% of operating revenue. So we're at the stage we're at now. Now, I did hear unofficially on one of the TV programs that we just got a check from the land, I don't know what to call it nowadays, but where we go to throw our refuse, rubbish, RRC something, has given us a check for $250,000 plus or minus for a lawsuit that went on with one of the Enron or one of those major companies. So that'll go into the fund balance most likely, and that'll help us a little bit. But our auditor recommends the 5 to 15%. Moody's, that's the credit rating for businesses, depends upon a reasonable amount in the fund balance of, say, 8 to 10% of operating revenue. And a couple of years ago, we did get our interest rate raised because Moody's didn't think we had enough money in the fund balance. It was a lot less than it is now. When they did that, I think it was like 400,000. Now we're in much better shape, although not in perfect shape. So what I want to say is that you just can't go into the fund balance and take money willy-nilly. So that's a bit of an upward pressure on the selectmen as well, that the fund balance, there's a balancing point in the fund balance that we all have to be careful of. So I really want you to understand the fund balance, and I'll probably talk a lot about it over this whole budget season over the next X months, because you'll hear a lot about it in the selectmen meetings, and you should understand what it is. And if you want to, you can read it about the fund balance. There are rules for it in the charter, and you can read the charter, get a copy at the town hall, and from the town clerk, and that should help you. Now, I just want to say I have a whole bunch of information to provide on this next subject, which is the appropriation of funds. I just want to try to give you an idea of, of how the town works financially over the next few months. Perfect it won't be, because it's very complex, and I'm trying to boil it all down and make it simple to understand for myself, never mind you, but it's very complex. And I personally am not a finance director. I'm a CEO that always has at my right hand a good finance director. And I can tell you that, matter of fact, excellent finance directors. And I can tell you, Henry Centrella, our finance director, is excellent. And he's a pleasure to work with. And he thinks the right way, and he'll give you the right information. And he won't let you push him for inaccurate information. He wants to make sure that it's conservative and it's accurate. And I appreciate that from him, because that's what I expect from a finance director. So whenever we go to borrow to do anything, and we want to borrow money for one reason or another, or set up some project, we have to do a thing which is called in the charter appropriate funds. So that's a term you should become familiar with, appropriating funds. And that means like reserving. You have to say, in order to borrow, we have to appropriate in our budget, or one way or another, enough funds to cover everything we want to do on that particular project. And there are many ways of doing it financially. But basically our funds come from four areas, some of which include taxes. The budget, most favored, that may include taxes and may not. Depends on how the budget comes out each year. Fund balance, if it's safe. If the fund balance were $3 million in the fund balance, then we'd have plenty of money there and we could borrow from there. And in my sheets that I put out for plans for the next 5 years, that's where we would put a lot of our savings, probably in there or in some special savings account, same sort of thing. Then we would have money to draw when we needed it for buildings and things. The next thing, another alternative is bank notes, short-term or long-term, preferably not more than 4 years, with short-term interest rate. We'd have to pay interest on that, of course. By the way, on the fund balance, we get interest. We get that from wherever we have the fund balance invested. That's where we get interest on that. Okay, and then the bond, and we don't, according to Henry, we don't like to do bonds unless they're $1 million or more or over, and that usually requires some short-term borrowing because of the way bonds work. So with that, I think I've pretty well exhausted my time for today. Next week will be another selectman meeting on Monday, and what I do is, because it's past my bedtime, these selectman meetings, as I said before, what I'll do is I'll tape it on my tape recorder, and I'll watch it that night, probably 1 or 2 in the morning, and I'll try to analyze it and try to give you some feedback. What I'm hoping they do this time is move the question more often, stick to more the real policy issues, get a budget projection from the town manager for this year's budget and some idea how we're proceeding on the approach to next year's budget. If that happens at the selectmen meeting and it runs in a short time, more like an hour and a half than 3 or 3.5, and we don't have any long presentations, I'll be a very happy person. So with that, I say thank you very much. Watch the selectmen meeting, and then watch my meeting, my program next Friday, where we'll talk about the selectmen meeting and try to give you some insight into how things are happening there. Thank you very much. Good night, and have a happy new year.